I don't want to hear that you're tired. Shut up and grind. Rest is for after you've earned it. I cringed as I listened to a millennial say this about Gen Z on a podcast last week. Not because what he was saying was necessarily wrong, although I do think it was. It's more so the impulse behind it and the gross mischaracterization of Gen Z that we continue to do. I've heard all these things and many others like them far too many times from far too many people. And honestly, it is annoying, exhausting, and it just completely misses the point of who Gen Z is and what they're facing in this life. It is just so frustrating. It reminds me as a millennial of reading all these articles and watching all these news pundits say that I can't buy a home because I love avocado toast too much. That my career is floundering not because companies cut you at the drop of a dime in order to increase their profits, but because I wasn't willing to stick it out enough. Gen Z is tired. It's not that they're overly sensitive. It's the fact that they are detecting signals. They are paying attention to what has been put in front of them, to the outcomes that they're told to expect, and they are saying, we don't want that. But when we fail to listen to them in their voice as who they are, then we continue to misdiagnose them. Gen Z isn't fragile. They're just tired of dysfunction. And so what we might call a lack of grit is really just them not wanting to put up with the mess. We might call them high maintenance or fragile for asking questions and demanding more, for not being willing to sacrifice their entire lives for the sake of a corporation. And in reality, all it is Gen Z pushing back against systems that have for decades very quietly ground people down and sometimes very loudly did so. So when a millennial jumps on a podcast and they're talking about Gen Z being lazy and they just need to shut up and grind, it falls on deaf ears. And I actually, he's not all wrong. To some extent, I can agree. There's this element of being able to use the abundant time and flexibility that you have and make the most of it. But also, is not this whole shut up and grind, hustle mentality the same thing that took previous generations and ground them down to the point where they were having mental breakdowns by 40? The whole midlife crisis thing came because you decided to spend all of your 20s and 30s neglecting your health, emotional, relational, spiritual, physical, for the sake of your job. And then by the time you hit 40, you were just done. And previous generations, we act like we lived in these rosy colored times. The drinking, the drugs, the crises, all of it. Why are we pushing people to go down that same path? Why are we looking at those who have come after us and saying you need to do exactly what we did, knowing how broken and messed up it left us? I run into this a lot when I'm consulting with organizations, where you'll have the older employees who will be visibly upset at Gen Z for not wanting to do the same things they did. There was a story recently, this is off the top of my head, I want to say it was the defensive coordinator for the Vikings, Kwesi Adofo, I want to say. He just got fired. This is the same man who took 2 weeks paternity leave, still worked while he was on paternity leave. People scoffed at him for taking said paternity leave, and then they fired him anyway. Take that paternity leave. Listen, fathers, your kids need you. When my career started in finance, it was years before I had kids, but I remember this conversation about paternity leave being had, and someone said to me, yeah, you get it, but you would never take that. Are you insane? We got to stop this foolishness. Therefore, Gen Z is looking and they're saying, no, as a father, I'm going to be with my kids. I'm going to take the 6 weeks or the 12 weeks, which honestly is absolutely nothing. If you know anything about babies, the idea that after 6 weeks or even 12 weeks, you just go back to work is insane. Absolutely insane. The baby needs you. Mama needs you. Mama needs all the help that she can get. And those early months of relational equity and trust, and this is now, we're getting into a whole nother scientific realm, but it lays the foundation for the relationship you are going to have with that kid going forward. Take the paternity leave. Please, let me look at my notes and get back to where we're supposed to be. They watched their parents succumb to burnout. They saw their loyalty go unrewarded. The institutions that promised stability only delivered unending anxiety. They're wired to ask, what is the system doing for me? It's no accident that Gen Z is currently experiencing, on some levels, a spiritual revival. They're starting to ask questions that I think can best be described as the inner game. They're going beyond the standard metrics that we've used to define success, how much money you have, where you live, what kind of car you drive, and they're asking deeper and more meaningful questions. Who am I? What is my place and purpose on this earth? Now, they're not the first to do this. We've done this for as long as we have existed as humans. I think about Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I think about Ikigai. I think about Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I think about Rick Warren's The Purpose-Driven Life. We have always asked this question, what am I doing here? Gen Z is just following in the footsteps of those who have come before them. And they're just doing it from a different frame. They're asking about purpose in a time where they can't buy homes. They're asking about purpose when, if they choose to have kids one day, they have absolutely no idea how much that's going to cost. They're asking about purpose at a time, the first time in human history, where we don't know the skills we are going to need 25 years from now. If the predictions are true about how AI is going to advance, this idea that you just need to be a good AI manager is going to be obsolete in 2 years. So what does 20 years from now look like? Gen Z is asking these big, purposeful, meaningful questions with this as the backdrop. Gen Z questions culture, power, and unspoken rules because they don't trust them. There is an inherent assumption that they are neither neutral nor benevolent. So Gen Z watches the signals. This is something they're particularly good at. Gen Z notices the misalignment between what you say and what you do, your stated values and how you actually behave. So when that boss shows up and says, hey, we're all family here, but then grind people into the ground, they take note. When that boss dangles that promotion in front of you in front of your colleague for years or months on end for it to see it never come to fruition, they take note. When that boss comes to you and complains about your colleagues, they take note. Because if you're talking about them, if you're dangling promotions in front of them, if you're treating them like this, then what are you going to do to me? Gen Z is not playing that game for the most part. They're paying attention to the signals. They're paying attention to not just your words, but your actions as well. It's that old adage, right? Actions speak louder than words. There's what you say and what you do. And as Sister Maya said to us, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Gen Z enters the workforce seeing these things, and they run. Because their entire lives have been sat at the seat of dysfunction, and they don't want to now enter into the working world and see that as well. No Social Security, no retirement benefits, loyalty going unrewarded, the student loan crisis, the inability to buy a home. They're looking at everything, the leadership that they grew up under. They're looking at all of it. And now as they enter into the working world, and for those on the upper end of the Gen Z spectrum, they're 30 and they're exhausted. They're 30 and they're tired. They are 30 and saying, I just don't want to deal with this every day. It's part of the reason that Gen Z changes jobs so often. 40% of them say that they don't plan to be in their current role in the next 3 years. And I understand, because part of that is not just the dysfunction that they're seeing around them, but it's also working your behind off to get a 3% raise. It's not worth it. You know, what previous generations got to do is sit in dysfunction. sit in misaligned values, sit in behavior that didn't match the words that came out of people's mouths. But they also got paid handsomely. And they also got to buy homes. And they also got to save for retirement. And they also got to take some pretty nice vacations. And they also got to put their kids through private school. It's very different when you, and listen, there's a conversation about ethics and morality that could be had that we're not going to have here, but it's a very different conversation when everything you want is within your reach and you're willing to put up with the misalignment because you're still able to get the things you want. That's very different from the person who's now sitting in a backdrop of brokenness, sitting in dysfunction, but also not able to truly enjoy their lives. Stressing over every dollar, not able to save, seeing the price of everything go up because once it goes up, it doesn't come back down. When you understand the world that Gen Z inhabits, their questions make more sense. Their intolerance makes more sense. Their search for meaning and purpose makes a lot more sense. We, the leaders in the room, we sit in the perfect position to walk them through that if we can walk with grace and empathy. This is why that inner game matters so much. Because suppressed stress always leaks into culture. You can try your best to just bury it, but eventually it's gonna come out. Eventually what is in you is the thing that comes out of you. And what we fail to remember is that broken systems are made up of broken people, people who are trying to figure themselves out. Because it's not just Gen Z asking these questions. You have your millennials, your Xers, and your boomers who are all asking, what is my place in this world? We're just doing it from maybe different vantage points and different plot points on the timeline, but we're all there. We're all stressed out. And it's leaking into the cultures that we create as leaders. The flaw for Gen Z right now is underestimating how long it takes for a system to change. It's not having a good level of discernment to know, hey, this is going to change and it will take time and I need to stick it out, versus, nah, I just got to get up and run. And I think millennials are in the perfect position to help Gen Z, to be the bridge. As we have now taken over the majority of middle management roles, and 10 years from now, it's going to be Gen Z in that position, our job as millennials is to help usher and guide them along the way, especially because they're just the remix to us. We had the internet first. We had social media first. We had student loans first. We had the inability to buy a home first. We had people, political pundits, making all sorts of outrageous conversations and notions and, misdiagnoses about us first. Granted, every generation has gone through that one because every generation thinks the one after them is absolutely crazy, but we were the first to not surpass our parents in terms of income and wealth and life outcomes. So our advantage in the room, millennials, elder millennials especially, is we get to be the bridge. But that takes grace and patience and empathy and not doing what generations before us did and just misdiagnosing them. The future won't be built by silencing Gen Z's questions or by putting them down. It's going to be built by leaders who know how to regulate themselves and create better cultures and create better systems and recognize where the dysfunction lies and knowing how to speak to it and speak through it. And having the generational fluency to talk to the Gen Zers in the room and the millennials in the room and the Xers in the room and the boomers who are left so that we can work together cohesively and healthily. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Being that leader who moves from individuals to systems and creating healthy cultures. Now, you might be thinking to yourself as a member of Gen Z, nope, I don't have time, I don't have patience, I'm not gonna do this. And you might be thinking to yourself as a millennial, an Xer, or a boomer, I don't have time, I don't have patience, I'm not gonna do this. Continue to live in dysfunction. Continue to not figure out what's happening in here and wondering why every place you go and show up, the dysfunction follows. Because wherever you go, there you are. There's a lot of problems out there, but we control what we can control. And that's the inner game. There are questions that we can answer for ourselves, that we can take control of for ourselves, and we can figure out. And then that helps us better navigate the mess that is outside. The only reason I can say that is because that's pretty much been the last 20 years of my life. I've been trying to figure out what's going on in here so that I can better function out there. Because it's a whole lot of mess and jerks and idiots and just really nasty people out there. But I can't let them control me. But you're watching this and you're thinking, yeah, sure, CJ, whatever. That's you. That's not me. And I feel you, because what do I know? I'm just some guy from Brooklyn.